Overall, I give the Dan Lanning hire a B, which is above average, but I would not say it was, as groundbreaking per se as the hire that USC made with Lincoln Riley. So coaching pedigree, I give him a B plus because he's a defensive coordinator for one of the best defenses we've seen. Now, Kirby Smart is a defensive head coach. That's a part of it. Lanning was the guy calling the plays. Kirby Smart signed off on him. I've asked Georgia people about that. It's the way that that went down. But clearly, from an X's and O's perspective, Lanning is a guy who has shown so far that he knows what he's doing on the defensive side of the ball. And Oregon is hoping that he's going to be able to bring that same sort of pedigree to the defensive side for a defense that has regressed pretty significantly since Andy Avalos left in 2019. The defense has gone in the wrong direction in a number of ways. But he was a big part of putting together that defense that won a national championship and, relatively held Bryce Young in check. Not entirely, of course, but like that was I think we all agree, not a hot take here. That was a really, really good defense, and it's the reason they won the national championship. But the reason that I wouldn't look at that and go, oh, well, that's got to be an A minus, an A plus, or an A something, is because he hasn't yet been a head coach. And just because you're a good coordinator does not mean you're going to be a head coach. Now, Georgia fans knew that Lanning was going to get hired eventually. He was someone who interviewed for the Oklahoma job as well before they ended up hiring one of their guys, Brent Venables, who's been a defensive coordinator with the Sooners and Norman in the past. But like, if you haven't been a head coach, I can't put you in the A category and be honest about it, because it is different, right? Everything I was talking about today on the show, it is a lot different. You get paid more for a reason. You have more responsibilities. There are more people who want or need to talk to you. You have to deal with a lot more administrative duty. Like, there's just a lot more that goes into being a head coach. And you also are in charge of overall determining how your team is going to plan to win football games. Whereas when he was at Georgia, Dan Lanning was just figuring out how the defense is going to help you win a football game, but he didn't have any say in the offense. Now he has to, at least in some capacity, be involved on both sides of the ball. That's an adjustment. And it's, not a small adjustment. We've seen coordinators take off and do really well. The last national championship winning defensive coordinator to get hired as a head coach, Dave Aranda, just won, I believe it's 12 games at Baylor this year. I'm pretty sure they beat Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but they won the Big 12 championship, keeping Oklahoma State from going to the college football playoff by about that far. Pretty thrilling game. Sean McDonough on the call. I like Sean McDonough doing play-by-play. But anyway, that's an example of a coordinator, taking over as a head coach, and it goes very well. But other times, a coordinator takes over a head coach, and it doesn't go as well because it is a new job. It's a different job, and he's had to put together the staff and the offensive coordinator hiring Kenny Dillingham. That's kind of a risky pick. It's a guy that he knows from previous staffs throughout his college career, but Dillingham's never been an offensive coordinator. And remember, for the coaches who have coach games, when I'm doing these evaluations, that's one thing I looked at. Who are your assistant hires? I think Tosh Lupoy was a good hire from a recruiting standpoint. He hasn't been a DC in a long time, but I figure, and at least I would hope that Lanning is going to continue to call plays. But Dillingham, I think, is the biggest question mark on that staff. And I might come back for, our next round of coaching evaluations in the offseason next year and say, like, yeah, Dan Lanning didn't make great assistant hires because Tosh Lupoy's working out because the defense is doing well, but the offense wasn't up to par. That's entirely possible because you have a first-time play caller. Like, that's a legitimate question mark on the Oregon staff. And that's part of being a head coach, is you are signing off on all of these hires. It's about the program that you're able to put together from a player's standpoint and from a coach's standpoint. So the coaching pedigree schematically on the defensive side of the ball is about as high as you could get. But if you've never been a head coach before, that's a big adjustment, and he has to prove that he's capable of doing that. If you talk to Georgia fans, they'll say that he is, and they've known for a long time he was going to get hired as a head coach because he's risen really, really quickly. He's only like 35, 36 years old. He's a really, really young guy. But transitioning into the next element of a new coach evaluation hire, yeah, I think I said that right. Anyway, you know what I'm saying, is recruiting. And I think the recruiting expectations for him are pretty high because he's coming off, or the program, I should say, is coming off of 4 years in which they've won the Pac-12 recruiting battle 4 years in a row. And Lanning and that Georgia team, including most of the players coming on the defensive side of the ball, just sent 15 players to the NFL draft. 5 of them were in the first round. You had number 1 overall pick Trayvon Walker. Trayvon Walker. I just blanked on his name. Is that even right? What? I have to look that up. I'm sorry. I just could totally it's Trayvon Walker. For some reason, I thought it was something else. Anyway, Trayvon Walker, you had Jordan Davis, you had Lewis Seen, Nakobe Dean fell because of injury concerns. Like, they had a bunch of guys there. So naturally, if you put that sort of team out there, that's not an expectation for him coming up to Oregon to put out 15 picks and 5 first rounders at any point in time. That's, not something we're likely to see again, maybe from a Georgia or Alabama, but even for those schools, it's really hard to replicate. And so Oregon is coming off of a really strong run of recruiting success in the Pac-12 and nationally. In fact, higher than they've ever been. And Lanning, with that sort of recruiting background, I think has set the expectation pretty high. And so far, the recruiting has gone well for Oregon in a first non-full offseason. We'll see what he does in the class of 2023. They're still waiting on getting a big-time quarterback commit and really to bring in some big-time defensive players, because they've been in on several guys, but they haven't gotten any verbal commitments yet, and a couple of them look to be trending in a different direction. So we'll wait and see how all that plays out. But I think the recruiting expectations are certainly there for Dan Lanning as he goes up to Oregon. State of the program and his biggest challenge, that's less about the new coach himself and more of what he's coming into. I'd put that again at B+. Oregon got off to a 10-2 start. They're the reigning Pac-12 North champions, which, doesn't fully matter anymore. But they were a 10-win team last year. A lot of the players are back. Not all of them. There are some losses in the secondary, on the defensive line, of course, with Kayvon Thibodeau. And they're going to have to incorporate some new skill position players, but there's some talent there, and we'll see how well they're able to mesh with Bo Nix as the quarterback. But the offensive skill talent is there. It's young and unproven, but it is certainly there. Part of those recruiting classes that Mario Cristobal's had for the last 4 years, that they've been very successful in that sense. So there's plenty of talent on the roster. And, I think the biggest challenge, frankly, is that it's not a rebuild for him. And he's a first-time head coach who has to win now. Lincoln Riley needs to win now because USC expects this to be a quick turnaround, and Lincoln Riley's won a bunch of games, and that's just the standard that they've set for him in terms of their expectations for him as their head coach. But Dan Lanning hasn't been a head coach before, but if he comes in and goes 8-4, that'd be a pretty disappointing season given the talent on Oregon's roster. Their offensive line should be one of the best units in the Pac-12 again. Their defensive line is not going to be quite as good, but if you're a sharp defensive mind, the way Dan Lanning has been for the last couple of years at Georgia, you should be able to come in and elevate the defense from what it was a season ago, where Oregon, I think, was last in the Pac-12 in passing yards allowed. They were, again, absolutely shredded through the air, and they didn't create pressure very well, and there are real expectations there. And he has to do that as a head coach who's, first time being a head coach is going to be against his former team on September 3rd down in Atlanta, which is a pretty rude awakening to the college football world. But there's plenty of potential there. Here's another challenge that he's got. If he wants to get buy-in from the fans long term, he's got to recruit and develop a young quarterback. Duck fans, I talk to them all the time. A lot of them are very fed up with the whole transfer quarterback situation, and they want a homegrown quarterback, which I understand and is perhaps a segment for another day. But if he's able to do that, then the fans will be all in even more. And so far, the reception to him has been positive because he's done a lot of good things on the recruiting trail for Oregon, kind of salvaged this class of 2022 the way that not many were really expecting. But the weakest area, I will say, at least right now, it's something that could potentially change depending on how much success he has on the field as Oregon's head coach, is the last area where I'm assessing coaches who have not yet coached in the Pac-12 is how did you raise your team's profile when you were hired? And in that sense, I'd give it a C. I'd just say it's average, even though he was clearly a highly sought after coordinator who had other offers or potential opportunities to be a head coach. Like I said, he interviewed for the Oklahoma job. I'm sure there were other schools and teams that were interested in him. And he's done good things as a defensive coordinator, but we haven't seen him as a head coach yet. But the reason I say it's a C on raising the team's profile, whereas Lincoln Riley, I'm pretty sure I gave it an A. Does Oregon feel any bigger with Dan Lanning there than they were a season ago? Right now, I would say no. I mean, yeah, they've had these offseason recruiting victories and whatnot, but that's not necessarily, it's not like the recruiting class is getting to a spot where they haven't been before. It's just better than where it was when Mario Cristobal left the program to go and be the head coach at Miami. So I would say that this is a grade that could definitely go up, but I think that's the lowest area right now, and where he has it's kind of a, he has something to prove in that sense. He has to prove that he is someone who can raise Oregon above where they were the last few years when they were very close to a college football playoff season in 2019, and then I don't talk about 2020, it wasn't a real season, and then 2021 Oregon was 10-2. And then they got shellacked. Well, they were 9-1, got shellacked by Utah, beat Oregon State, then got shellacked by Utah again. That's not a great place for it to be. So if he can elevate them schematically beyond what Mario Cristobal showed in the last month of that season, I think it'll, leave a good taste in the mouths of Duck fans, because that was definitely not something that that Oregon fans were pleased with, to not just lose, but to lose the way that they did. But that all remains to be seen. So coaching pedigree, B+, because he hasn't been a head coach yet. Recruiting expectations, A-. State of the program he's coming into, it was a disappointing end for Oregon last year. It was still a 10-win season, and there are a lot of teams who would love to have a 10-win season in college football. I give that a B+, and then raising the team's profile, C. If you disagree at all, hop in the comments. We'll go back and forth. Maybe you'll change my mind. You never know. I'm not quite as stubborn as you might think, but I can be from time to time, but you'll just have to find out. I appreciate everyone listening. See you next time, and have a wonderful rest of your day.